Hey everybody, this is Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
I'm only going to speak in Dark Tongue the entire episode. Come, Shahi.
Oh, this is going to be a long episode. Well, with that being said, what we're here to dive in today is one of our favorite armies. I know it's one of Evan's favorite. We're going to talk about everything Beastmen. Woo! You excited?
My chest hair is.
Whoa, whoa. Well, keep your shirt on, sir. But let's dive in. So, Beastmen are a great army, really popular. They've been around for quite a long time. That being said, they were one of the later additions to Warhammer Fantasy
That's
back in the
only a
day.
technicality. Okay, I'm going to hold you to
That
that
is true.
because they used to just have chaos as one big blob and then they split it up. So it's only a tech. They were there before.
That's true. Just as Undead used to be a combined force book as well. I remember having my vampires with a unit of mummies back in the day. But Beastmen have been in the lore since the very beginning. They're very iconic to the lore, the universe, and Warhammer: The Old World. We're still excited today. They did make a slight stint in AOS, but of course the gods realized that they belonged in Old World, so they brought them back properly.
Mm-hmm.
Very excited that we're also seeing. They just saw the releases not too recently. I don't know when you're going to be watching this episode, but they just announced them at the Adepticon announce, which is fantastic. Love to see the new Shaman model, really fantastic, and excited to in the future dive into the Arcane Journal because it's very exciting to talk about that. But we're going to talk about the core rules today for the army. It is a big staple of Warhammer: The Old World. We're so glad it's there. So let's Evan, let's load it up and dive in.
All right, so we have the army list here. So pretty typically, we have characters are 50%. Also,
Mm-hmm.
pretty typically, we have essentially a 0 to 1 of each of the like Lord level characters. The Beast Lord
Mm.
is your Lord level like regular Gore who has, and if you read the lore, he's basically the most badass, right? He can
Yeah,
fight everyone, and whenever he's deemed weaker, or someone else has gotten up in the tribe and is stronger than him, they'll challenge him to the death, and then that one will take over. So the Beast Lord is always just the strongest fighter in the tribe, right?
that's
Then
right.
we have the Great Bray Shaman, who's essentially the most powerful wizard in the army, especially
Yep.
with
Mm-hmm.
some of the spells we'll see later. The Great Bray Shaman is very much a kind of a key element here. And then the Doombull. If you thought the Beast Lord was crazy, what if he was a Minotaur who was also beastly? I mean, strength 6 base on a regular character? Are you kidding?
Ooh,
That's
spicy.
nuts. So,
Yeah.
I feel like the only downside of playing Beastmen is you only get to have 2 of these in a 2,000 point army. You can't have all for one of each, right?
Yeah, and again, that's different from Grand Army to Grand Army. This pattern we have seen, it's in more than one, but it does mean you can't have two of the best melee characters and two of the best wizard characters, right? So it
Yeah.
is restricting that, as Evan said, and your typical 2,000 point games, you're only going to get two of these. So, geez, I really want two Beast Lords, but I really want that level four wizard. You're going to have to pick and choose. You can't have it all.
Right, and one thing that's interesting about Beastmen that's a little bit different than the other factions is that all 3 of these characters are the same leadership. So if you take them, you get to just pick whichever one you want to be your general. That's it's not like if you take a Beast Lord, now the Great Bray Shaman can't be the general anymore. So you can take whichever one of the 3, which is great.
Right, because normally it's whoever is the highest leadership by
Yes.
default will be the general. It's when there are equal leaderships for your characters that you, the player, gets to choose. So it's really interesting that this army gets to choose because sometimes you might want that to be your melee character, but there's sometimes you'd rather have your wizard be the general. It really depends on the type of army you're constructing and
Yeah.
your strategy and how you're playing it.
And perhaps more so than some of the other factions in the game, this army list here is very controlled by which one of these 3 you pick to be your general. Because you very often will have one of these 3 as your general. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on who that is, it will then change some of the slots in core, special, and rare.
Okay. And then we have the Wargors, Bray Shamans, Bulls, and Centigor Chieftains, but I'm not seeing any limiting factors there, Evan.
Yeah, so these are just essentially your hero level character. That's kind of the old nomenclature. The Wargor can be your BSB in the main army list. I very much suspect that the Gorbel will be able to be a BSB in the Minotaur Army of Infamy. We will see
We'll see.
when that comes about. And then the Bray Shaman is your level 1 or level 2 wizard. Possibly more useful than many other factions, lower level wizards, because of some of the signature spells you can take. They're very viable, I believe. And
Mm-hmm.
then the Centigor Chieftain is just adorable. And you know what?
Yeah,
There's only one option here, and he's called the Warhoof, and he's great. Okay, and
great
I
name.
think
Great
people
name.
might have missed in the announcement recently. that the Centigor Chieftain, the Warhoof, there's going to be a special character version of that. So there's going to be a special character who's a Warhoof, and I love that.
Because
That's
it's
awesome.
awesome. Special
Yes.
Warhoof. So yeah, no restrictions there. Besides, of course, the number of points you are allowed to spend on characters based upon the size of the game that you're playing. So, yeah, Beastmen have some freedom there. But moving on to core, looks like the typical 25% of your roster needs to be core. That's very common for almost every army. But there's some additional. We start with a gore herd requirement.
Yes. This is no big deal at all because for one, Gore are the most cost-effective infantry in the game. Fight me, fight
Mm-hmm.
me. Okay. The Gore will fight you. Okay. You gotta get through
Oh,
me
for
first.
sure, absolutely.
Secondly, you can bring a unit of 5 for like 35 points. So if you want to run nothing but
That's so cheap.
Minotaurs, yeah, if you want to run nothing but Minotaurs, nothing but Chaos Warhounds, or let's say all you want to have is monsters, you're gonna have your whole core just be Razor Gore or something.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, go for it. You can just have 5 guys hanging out in the corner, just like waving their little pom poms. 35
It's
points.
such a small tax. Yeah, it's barely
Right.
even worth mentioning.
But a lot of Beastmen armies will have a unit of like 40 of these guys because they're just. So, okay, a Lothern Seaguard with his shield is like 13 points. So if
Yeah.
you take a unit of 20 Lothern Seaguard, that's the same price as 40 of these dudes. And these guys are
Mm-hmm.
strength 4 on the charge, toughness 4 all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What's not to love?
Yep.
Anyway, no, and they can ambush. Like, do that.
Yeah. Well, you're skipping ahead. Skipping ahead. Let's talk about
Okay.
compositions. So after
Anyway,
the Gords, what
then it's
else?
just so then your regular core units are the Ungor, which are a little bit of quite a different unit. They do have different roles. And they have different special rules than the Gore. The Ungor can take spears, for example, so they can be a little more of a defensive brick that way, or they can take
Yep.
short bows, so they can be a skirmisher. Very commonly, you see your great Bray Shaman will hang out with a unit of Ungor to essentially eat magic missiles for him and hang, just sit next to him. Or you could use the special dagger that lets you sacrifice models to cast better. Ungor are great
Yep.
for that too.
Yep.
Um,
And then we see the Chaos Warhounds, which is the same as we see in the Warriors of Chaos book. Yes.
yes, but you don't want Chaos Warhounds because Razor Gore are just better. Okay?
Yeah.
And Razor Gore are also
They're
there.
really good.
Mike, how many Toughness 5 core units are you aware of? Because Razor Gore
Core
exist.
units that are toughness 5. Sheesh. I don't. Um, I mean, you
That might be the
can
only
do
one.
a chaos. Well, no, because in the Chaos Arcane Journal, you can take one heavy chariot as core, and that would be toughness 5.
Okay, well, I would
Um,
bet my life that the Razor Gore would just crush that chariot because I'm going to take 3 Razor Gores. There you go.
don't get me wrong,
10. 10 Razor
Razor
Gore.
Gores are amazing, but yes,
Yeah.
to your point, toughness 5 in terms of any unit sans a monster is very uncommon to find, let alone to find a toughness 5 in the core slot. That is definitely something very rare, and it's very powerful, which is why you see Razor Gores are so popular with Beastman Army because they're just a great unit.
Right. And you also have an unlimited number of Tuskor chariots, so you can just have a full fleet of chariots should you wish to. And if you ever run
Mm-hmm.
into a river or a low linear obstacle, you'll cry. But other
Yeah,
than that, you're just like,
but thematic chariot army is awesome, and definitely chariots have always been one of those themes that the beastmen have been associated with. You don't
Mhm.
have to build a chariot army, but it is definitely the grand army out of the box allows you to make a very heavy chariot themed list if you want to, and there's some really cool things you can do with it too.
Right. And then we have 2 more slots that are based on what your general is. So first of all, if you do take a Beast Lord, then you can have a Bestigor herd as a core
Mm-hmm.
choice. I think the
Mm-hmm.
core is already amazing, but I often find it very difficult to want to take an infantry unit that isn't part of the core. So if I want to have Bestigor, I often take the Beast Lord in general, and then I build
Mm-hmm.
around that. And the Bestigor is also one of the best places for your Beast Lord to be, just hanging out in the herd using their veteran to help him reroll his stupidity checks when he fails against the gods and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then you've got the if your general's the Doombull or Gorbel, you can have a Minotaur herd. Now a Minotaur herd in a core unit, okay, that's just. I think that's pretty exciting, to be honest. I think that if you're talking about a core unit, that's powerful. You can bring just 6 of these guys and put your Minotaur
Mm-hmm.
in there. Why not?
Yeah, same thing. Even before we get to anything in the Arcane Journal, the Grand Army composition allows you can see if you want to go really chariot heavy, you can go really chariot heavy. If you want to go Minotaur heavy, you can go really Minotaur heavy. I love seeing compositions like this that allow a lot of that player freedom and creativity. And if you really want to make fun thematic lists, it lets you do that, which is great to see.
Yeah, and so this is even before we get an Army of Infamy that's supposed to be Minotaur focused. We can already have Minotaurs as a core unit, so that's
Yeah,
great.
it's already a great start.
Okay, so in special, we have Bestigor herds and Minotaur herds. We already talked about them, but now you can take extra ones. There's Harpies, which are amazing little skirmishers, and we have Centigors, Dragon Ogres, which everyone should know about because they're one of the most cost-effective units of the game. Again, Razor
Yeah.
Gore
And
and
that's
the
another one of those units you're going to see in Warriors of Chaos. So you
yeah
will see there are multiple entries here where both the Beastmen list and the Warriors of Chaos list, there is some sharing back and forth, mostly that the Warriors are taking things that are in the Beastmen roster. But again, we also saw an example where, for instance, the Giant Chaos Spawn, that when the Warriors Arcane Journal can also be taken by Beastmen. So hopefully we're going to see some more things with the Arcane Journal when we talk about in the future from Beastmen that also Warriors or Chaos can use, because it's just great to see more units added to the game and more armies able to take them.
yeah, and I think that the two different lists will make use of them differently. For example,
Mm-hmm.
the characters that can join these units differ. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, a Doombull joining some Ogres might actually be a very interesting choice. We'll see that later. So, because of the Doombull's ability to have, what is it called? Where he frenzies, he makes his unit frenzy too. You can use that to make
Yep.
your Chaos Ogres suddenly become frenzied, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we also have, I think we skipped over one of my favorites, Centigor. Lovely. We'll
Love
talk
it.
about them later.
Mm-hmm.
And what if you had a Razor Gore and it pulled a chariot? So we have Razor Gore chariots here. These are then toughness 5 chariots with a, like a very stronger Razor Gore as it's being, pulled. So that's an interesting option as well. And then we have the cockatrice, which you're going to be like, what is that? Never heard of that before. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, it's cool. It's awesome. It's thematic, but it's rare
Little
to see it on the table.
squeaky chicken bird. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Yeah, and if you have a Bray Shaman as your general, which a lot of Beastmen armies do that now, you can have a Jabberslythe or a Cygor as a special choice, which a lot of Beastmen armies do not do. Even though I think the
No,
Jabberslythe is adorable.
they're
And
really cool. They're great models. Again, they could be a little bit more competitive, which is why there's just better options. It's not that they're bad; they're just stronger options. But they're really cool, and hopefully we'll see more of them in the future.
yeah, so we've got, if your general's a Doombull or Gorbull, you can have a Gorgon as a special choice. In addition to the Doombulls, in addition to the Gorgons, you can take in rare. So in a 2,000 point army, if you have a Doombull as your general, you could have 3 Gorgons. Now, I don't
Yep.
think people really do that because of and specifically because the Gorgon does have frenzy, so it means that they can
Mm-hmm.
just chase butterflies the whole game. But some people at the beginning of the edition were definitely doing that, and that's interesting. If people don't know, the Gorgon is essentially a Minotaur that's also a giant, so it's kind of
Yep.
a frenzied, horrifying monstrosity, and that's great. All right, and in
Yep.
rare, I think this is just one of the most fun sections of any book because you just have like every monster in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Like first we have the
Lots of
Dragon Ogre
monsters.
Shaggoth. Yeah, so I named my own internet handle after this because I love this dude. Um,
Yeah.
you're
Super cool.
if people don't know, dragon ogres all have existed since like the dawn of time because essentially the dragon ogres went to the gods and said we want immortality, and they said okay, we'll give you immortality as long as you serve chaos, and they're like fine, we'll do that. But what they didn't tell them was we'll make you immortal, but only if we also remove your ability to reproduce. So every dragon ogre has been alive for thousands of years, and that's every single one of them because they're all just been around since the beginning, which is great.
Yep.
And the oldest,
Yep.
most
Pros and
powerful ones
cons.
turn into shaggoths.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, what's a Jabberslythe? Do you know?
Jabberslide. So a Jabberslide is a crazy monster. It's like, what's the um a chaos spawn that's a chaos more spawny than a chaos spawn. It's pretty crazy. And to me, this is really was inspired by right from Alice in Wonderland. It was the
Uh,
what's it called, the
Jabberwocky?
Jabberwocky. Thank you. That's really what this is inspired from in terms of its origin, but it's of course Games Workshop's take on it. So it's way more horrifying than what they have in Alice in Wonderland, and it's really cool. I was in love with this model. I remember when it came out. It's a great kit. It's fantastic, but haven't seen it on the table a lot yet. I'm hoping we in the future we'll see some tweaks or balance updates because I'd love to see it on the table more because it's such a cool monster.
So we also have Cygors, which are stone throwers that are also a monster, and Gorgons and Giants. And you can bring over
Mm-hmm.
the Chaos Trolls and the Chaos Spawn from Warriors of Chaos. So even more
Love it.
monstrous stuff. I mean, it's just a big smorgasbord of crazy nonsense. I think that if there
Ogres
was
and
some kind of a
giants and
limit,
trolls. Oh my.
yeah, I think if there was some kind of a limit to characters, that if characters couldn't be 50% of your army's points, I think that Beastmen would surge to be one of the strongest armies because they just have such a good special and rare section full of crazy stuff.
Yeah, they definitely have the potential to do a monster mash list if that's
Yeah.
something you're excited about. They certainly have the variety for it. It's just that dang rare restriction 25%, preventing you from going all monsters all the time. But all monsters with a whole bunch of minotaurs, not a bad combo either.
None of these are over 250 points, so you can just take two of pretty much any of these. You can take two
I
giants, two
believe so.
Cygors, two Gorgons. You can just take two of any of these if you want.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and so I think something that's not here, it's because it was in the Wars Chaos Arcane Journal, is the Gigantic Chaos Spawn. So you'll find it there. That's very commonly shows up as a Beastman rare slot as well because of
hmm
how incredibly cheap they are for what they do. So we'll
hmm
obviously talk about that when we get to the Wars of Chaos Arcane Journal.
Yep. And then mercenaries, nothing special in particular to talk about there. And then allies. Again, allies aren't as used as often in event play or match play, but they can ally with. Who can they ally with, Evan?
It's just all of the essentially Ravening Horde armies. So Orcs and Goblins, Warriors of Chaos, Tomb Kings. But Orcs and Goblins are uneasy and Tomb Kings are suspicious. So Warriors of Chaos essentially are the closest ally to take.
hmm Yeah, definitely hang out with them quite a bit. And what does it say about their battle stand bearer? What in particular can be upgraded?
It's pretty much just the usual. So it's 25 points to become a Battle Standard Bearer, and then you can buy one banner of unlimited points limit. And this is the Wargor specifically character who can be a Battle Standard Bearer. Now, I believe that in the Army of Infinity that we've seen this quite often. For example, in High Elves there was two different Battle
hmm
Standard options, so that there
hmm
may be a Gorbil as an option, or even maybe a new character. Maybe there's a new character in that book who's like a hybrid, and that could be potentially be a Battle Standard.
That's exciting. All right, so that's the basic composition. So let's dive into the actual units and talk about some of the pros and cons of them. So we start with our Beastman Chieftain. Ooh, not too bad. Clock starting at 115 points. That's a pretty good stat line.
So a Beastman Chieftain is a bit weaker than essentially your Chaos Lord or your Exalted Champions equivalents, but they are cheaper as well, and they do
hmm
have just toughness 5 across the board here. What you're seeing is essentially for a starting cost very cheap, and these guys have Gaze of the Gods, so it's a perfectly viable idea to take a Wargors, give them a great weapon, and just be like, I'm just gonna hope I get some good stuff in Gaze of the Gods and beef up my unit strength with some attacks there. People do this with Night Goblin bosses that cost 35 points. I don't see any reason why you can't just do it with Wargors as well.
hmm Yeah,
Um,
and I know you're saying you're comparing it to the best stat line in the game, which is the Chaos Lord, but
right.
compared to many other the Lord choices for almost every other army, this is a very strong stat line.
Yeah, so an Empire General is 90 points, and so he's only 25 points less than this, but he has one less attack. He has lower toughness and strength and lower weapon skill. So if these guys are
Yeah,
just have both have hand weapons and they meet on the battlefield, the Beast Lord just wipes his wipes off
yep,
anything with the skin of
kicks
the Empire General.
can kick some butt for sure.
All right, so as weapons, we have additional hand weapon or great weapon. Um, you have heavy armor or light armor and shield. You'll see that often in the Beastmen characters and in all their units, not a lot of armor. You very often
Yeah.
have toughness, and that's what saves you. And you don't have any items that give you a regen save. So Beastmen characters are I got a little bit of armor and some toughness. That's it. And
Yeah,
and,
for
and
the
one
for the
yeah,
yeah.
and something that's really limiting currently, and maybe the Arcane Journal will change this. The only ward save item you have is Talisman of Protection. Like none of the items in the core Beastman book give you more ward saves to pick. So having, let's say, two fighty characters, they're not gonna both have like a good defense per se.
Well, I think it's more the Beastmen are more the best defense is good offense
Yeah.
kind of mentality is really what they're going for. They do have the toughness though, as Evan said. So you're not going to get a lot of armor save, but there are a lot of raw toughness 5 things. Certainly in this army, more so than most other armies, there's a lot of toughness 5, which is quite good in the old world being toughness 5. 4, 3 is your average. 4 is very, very important. 5 is great, and
Yeah.
you see that more in Beastmen than other lists. It would be nice if you had some armor on top of that, but again, if you're beating the skull of your opponents in first, then you don't need toughness
And you
because the
can
enemy's
still
dead is
have a
not.
2+ armor save. There's a but essentially like they have 50 points that they can spend on their mutations, and there is a
Mm,
mutation to give them more armor if they're on foot, +1. And you can have
okay.
obviously like bedazzling helm, or you can buy. There is one full set of full plate that you can buy. It's called blackened plate. So this is the perfect example of why characters obviously can buy armor that's not of the exact same subtype that they can buy normally, because there's a full
Hmm.
plate armor in Beastmen, and no model in the Beastmen army list can actually have full plate armor natively. So there wouldn't, obviously somebody has to be able to buy it, right?
Yep.
Um, and then the other thing we have in the Chaos Mutations we'll see later is that you can buy Slug Skin to give yourself and your whole unit -1 to hit. So one of the ways to play your Beast Lord is you put him in your Bestigor, for example, take Slug Skin, the whole unit's harder to hit now, and you can just have, he's going to be there to do some fighting. He's got Gaze of the Gods and Warband, so his leadership for his bubble can be improved by the unit he's in. Because if you aren't in a unit with your general, all of these characters are leadership 8 max, which isn't very high, right? So sticking him in the unit to have a higher leadership bubble is great. But the main reason I think that you take a Beast Lord over the Doombull, right, because these are your two fighty characters, is the Brayhorn. So the Brayhorn lets you, from turn 2 onwards, you can basically re-roll the ambush as long as you pass your leadership test. Which, hey, if you're basically in a unit, that unit's going to improve your leadership to 10, possibly with the rank bonuses, and now you're going to be able to have leadership 10 on this roll. And then if you pass it, you can now re-roll of your ambushers, which is great. So if you have an ambush heavy skew, you got to have a Beast Lord. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that while Wars of Chaos did get an ambush arcane journal list. That's one of the other themes for Beastmen. We talked about chariots as one of their themes. Offense is the best defense is a good offense is one of their themes. Minotaurs is another one of their themes. Monster Mash is another one of their themes, and ambushing is another one of these themes. These are all very Beastmen in terms of mechanics and themes, and you're going to see a lot of patterns of that. And that's just, quite frankly, those are all really fun ways to run an army as well. So they're really a great army, and I'm so excited because Beastmen in past editions were never done justice, in my opinion, and it feels like for the first time they're fairly competitive. They're really fun, and I love that we're seeing a whole bunch of Beastmen out on the table now, which is just awesome.
Yeah, you're definitely seeing them way more than ever before. One thing to point out here is that you can have a Wargor who is toughness 5, and you can ride a Centigor Chariot, which is normally toughness 4. This will give you 4 extra wounds, but then you get to use the toughness of the Wargor. So very common is to take a battle standard Wargor, put him on the Centigor Chariot for only 85 points, and now you have, for like 135 points, you have 6 wounds at toughness 5. That has a nice little bubble of re-rolling your leadership. So that's a very, and if you just give him a great weapon and some armor, that's a pretty decent fighty unit as well.
Yeah, great combo. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the Beastmen Shamans are definitely kind of the stars of the show, especially because of the magic you have access to. The Great Bray Shaman is one of my favorite models in the game because he is not just a wizard. His base strength is 4, his toughness is 5. Now this is huge.
Ooh.
Of infantry character who's a wizard who has toughness 5, I don't know if there's anything else other than the ogre wizards that have that. So that is amazing.
Yeah, I don't think there is. Well, you could with a vampire.
So the
Um,
vampires can be toughness 5, the ogres can be toughness 5, and the demon prince. But
but
that's pretty much it. So
that's a pretty small list.
yeah, and this guy's a regular infantry model, so he's on a small base and he can join units and get ranked up with them and everything. So that's impressive. And when people are like, "Wait, he's toughness 5?" Yeah, and he's weapon skill 5 too. So this guy
Yeah.
is basically a Wargor who also just casts spells.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep,
Um,
he definitely got beat up in school. I think growing up a whole bunch and got really tough and calloused, and then learned how to cast some magic, take down his enemies. It's great, and the model is fantastic too. And
yeah.
there's a new model coming out too. So I love these models.
They also have 3 of the most thematic and fun lores in the game. We've got Demonology, which is amazing
Mm-hmm.
for just shooting stuff, doing Steed of Shadows to throw. Here, let me just take 20 Gore and Skirmish, and I'm just going to throw them at you. And now they can just charge in whatever
Yeah.
direction they want to. What are you going to do?
It's a great lore, and it really focuses on buffs, debuffs, and some contextual movement. So
Yeah.
very powerful lore. Mm-hmm.
Dark magic is like, here, I'll have the best, one of the best hexes in the game, one of the best enchantments in the game, especially if you have Battle Lust and you cast that on your Minotaur unit and they go from 3 attacks to, stay
Mm-hmm.
with me here, 5 attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, so
That's
dark
fun.
magic's also, yeah, buffing, debuffing, less movement utility and
Oh,
more they
I
have some offensive
disagree.
spells.
I highly disagree, especially when you're playing Beastmen with Chariots. Infernal Gateway is one of the best spells in the game for taking your powerful
Yeah,
little characters and saying, I'm just going to teleport them out of combat. I'm going to reposition them over here. Because none of your Beastmen characters are going to fly. So you need some way to get them around, and Infernal Gateway is freaking great for that.
yeah, and there are differences in terms of the buffs, though. In terms of right, demonology is going to give you more of the raw stats, right?
Yeah,
Toughness, strength, attack characteristics, other things like that. Dark magic is again more of like, hey, your whole unit's frenzied now, right? Or rerolls all to misses. So again, if you want to take a double wizard, you could take one of each lore, right? So you get access to both the buffs. So there are some pretty exciting combos you can do. And like Evan saying, not all armies have access to demonology and dark magic, right? So that's one of the fun things about this edition is different wizards have access to different lores. So there's some fun combos here that just the beastmen can pull off with their units with a combination of spells.
yeah. And then we also have as an option Elementalism, which is just one of the two most powerful lores in the. Okay, one of the three most powerful lores in the game is Elementalism for sure. So you definitely see that quite a lot, especially because the signature spell isn't quite as often taken at all or ever. So
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
synergizes really well with the Beastman wanting to swap that anyway. And whereas with Demonology and Dark Magic, you very often want to just have a very specific set of spells. So you want to take Lore Familiar. With the Elementalism, you're like, I can just roll, whatever, right? And then you can take your incredibly overpowered item we'll talk about later. Um, so these guys can be mutated too. I often take the one that gives me higher initiative for like 10 points because then I'm initiative 5 and I can use that to pass my evade tests when people overrun into my wizard and I can be like, I'm just going to dart out of the way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they can also be ambushers if they're on foot. Okay, so you can take a level 2 wizard, just stick them in ambush and be like, I'm just going to show up behind you and just shoot Vile Tide at you. That is an option.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. And they can also ride the chariot. So the chariots for the Great Bray Shaman, he can make the Tuskor chariot bump up to toughness 5 the same way the Wargor can. So that's a great way to build him. Or if you have a regular Bray Shaman, you can maybe just put him on the Razorgore chariot. And then now he can now be toughness 5 as well. Everyone
Yeah.
can have fun.
And one thing to keep in mind about chariots, a lot of people forget is why put a wizard on a chariot? Isn't it exposing him? Well, again, it's a platform. So the biggest benefit is that's going to allow him to see 360 on a chariot. So again, there's kind of two different buffs for helping you with shooting or shooting spells or casting spells and or ranged weapons. One is I'm on a
Yeah.
large target so I can see over things. The other one is you're on a platform. Chariots out of the gate are platforms, so they allow you to C360 for shooting and or casting spells, and that's very powerful in particular when you're wanting to buff or debuff things because a lot of those spells have limited ranges, right? So you need to get closer to things, but typically the closer you get to your units or the front line of the battlefield, it's going to get harder and harder to see the opposing units or your units as well. So if you're on that chariot in the middle, suddenly you can see the things 360. It's a really powerful combo beyond just I'm on the chariot to be tougher, but I'm on the chariot for a utility purpose as well.
Yeah, so it is possible that you can take a Great Bay Shaman, Demonology, Lore Familiar, and take Slugskin and just stick him in the front rank of your Gore unit and be like, I don't care. I'm toughness 5 and you have
Yeah,
-1 to hit me. Good luck.
it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to deal with that for sure.
Yeah, and then he can just be like, cast my favorite spells of the game, which are assailant spells, and just be like, bam, I'm gonna whack you. Um, fun. And then you know what else you get? You get a Bray Staff. You know what a Bray Staff is? Your wizard now has a great weapon.
Yeah,
Who
because it's awesome.
so your wizard and he's got the 2 attack space and guess what? There's a spell later. This is one of my for fun games I love to take. It gives you plus D6 strength and attacks, and then you just have a great weapon too.
Hmm. Yeah, really powerful. I think the biggest thing is that people just don't expect it or they don't see it coming out of the gate. You expect, hey, I'm fighting a vampire, it's gonna do some damage, or a big demon prince, it's gonna do some damage. But people see the Bray Shaman, especially because they're all typically wizard models and have cloth over their face, and like, oh, it's just a empire wizard. It's like, no, here I am. Bam! And the people just underestimate how powerful this can be. That being said, you typically don't want your wizards in combat, but sometimes you do, and especially if you're at the right place at the right time with the right combo, it can be a huge game changer.
I will say I very, very often lose my Bray Shaman because I decided to charge him at something and I was like, let me at him. Fuck it. I'm just gonna send him in there. Hey, that Sky Cutter chariot with 1 wound left, I'm gonna go whack that. I'm gonna go charge myself at this thing and see what happens. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And
Yeah, but when
that's
it
what the stat
works,
line gets you.
it's oh so sweet when it works.
It absolutely is. I think that Beastmen. So first of all, I didn't mention this earlier. Beastmen is the most fun army to play. Okay, it is the
Super
most
fun.
fun. It's most fun for you and your opponent because you're not playing in such a way to make them not have fun. It's just that you're going to have lots of fun because it's very much a slot machine army where you're just like, I don't even know what's going to happen. We'll see, right? Okay, the Minotaur champion. So the Doombull, if you just look at the flat stats, a Doombull is just better than a Beast Lord, but that's not the only thing we're seeing here. First of all, the Doombull, he can't ride a chariot. He's too big. So whatever stats you see here, you have to compare them against what if the Beast Lord's riding a chariot, and then he has the 6 wounds. He's got all those extra attacks from those things too. Where the Doombull, he's just going to be on foot.
210 out of the gate. That's
yeah,
impressive.
He's Chaos Lord, a little more than a Chaos Lord in price. But what do we get? We have weapon skill 6, movement 6, so very monstrous infantry there. Strength 6 base.
Wow.
That is stronger than a Chaos Lord. That is stronger than a Vampire Lord.
Yep. Yes, it is.
That is I think this is one of the strongest melee characters in the game. The Ogre Tyrant is 5. This guy is stronger than an Ogre Tyrant.
I think it is the strongest character. Well, if we're taking out the dragon characters and things of that sort. If we're just talking about
I'm not talking about the mounts. I'm just talking about essentially the guy, the model.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of the Chaos Dragon
Galrock?
special character.
Galrock's probably strength 6. So in other words, he's the same,
but
right?
He's a monster though. So for infantry and
this guy is a monster. He's a monster. He will eat you.
Well,
that's what they do. The Minotaurs are here because they want to eat you. You're food.
Well, yeah. If I was a Minotaur, I'd be hungry all the time too. So yeah, okay, exciting. So
we still have the toughness 5, and we have and I think very importantly here we have 5 attacks. So I think there's a big break point between about around 4 and 5 where taking a really good magic weapon at this point makes a lot of sense because you have that force multiplier for how many attacks you get. Why spend 65 points on an Ogre Blade for a Beast Lord with 4 attacks when I could spend the same number of points to give my Doombull 5 attacks with it, right? Okay. Yeah. We could take armor. We could take a shield. You know what's funny here? The shield is 5 points. So as long as you have an allotment available, there's no reason not to just take a charm shield instead because they're the same cost. So screw it. Why not?
Yep. That's fair.
And we still have the Chaos Mutation, so we can take Slug Skin on this guy. We can take Armored Hide on this guy. We could take whatever else you want to do here. I think that the Doombull, you often see one sitting inside the Gore unit because monster infantry characters can join regular infantry, so he can just sit in there, have a big brick of cheap guys to guard him. That, however, is a very slow unit. I do think that we should be seeing, and we probably will be seeing, more just lone Doombulls or Gorbulls running around with their 360 charge because there's not very many units in the game that aren't like a dragon who want to be charged by a Gorbull with just a great weapon and some armor in the flank.
I think a combo I've seen a lot is have you seen these with dragon ogres? I think is a combo I've seen more recently. Seeing big, and again, what the main thing we're seeing here is in terms of raw stats and potential output, the Doombull is one of the best character sans riding a monster in the game, and so a lot of the Beastmen players are looking for ways and combos of delivery systems to make sure he's going to get into combat and be able to unleash his fury and rage upon the opponent. And so it's trying to find different ways, delivery mechanisms, and I think more recently we've been seeing that more often with larger dragon ogre units, not small ones, because typically people can punch through, kill 1 or 2 if they strike first, but if you start putting them in bricks of 4, 5, or 6 dragon ogres, suddenly, cool, you kill 2, it doesn't matter, there's plenty to punch you back with that Doombull, and he's going to manage how long. So
and
I've seen that more often more recently.
And it's very heinous to stick the Minotaur character who has if the Minotaur character has Slug Skin in with the unit of dragon ogres, that is just nuts.
Good combo. Yep.
Something else we see on all of them, they all have Warband as well. So they're all rerolling their charges, which is amazing. He has Gaze the Gods. He gets an impact hit. I forget about this all the time, that Minotaurs get impact hits. It's crazy.
He's got the horns, right? So, mess with the
it's
bull,
just not a thing I immediately think about. So, and then we'll talk about the special rules later, but he not only can, if he rolls doubles on his, or if he rolls the double on his Primal Fury, he gets to be frenzied. but also if he gets to get frenzied, he goes from 5 attacks to 7. Okay?
Ooh.
And as long as he passes Primal Fury, his hand weapon is AP2. So he's strength 6 base, and his hand weapon will be AP2 a lot of the time. So you could just take defensive items on this guy and just hit people with your hand weapon, and a lot of the times that's plenty, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is an option.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, God, look at this artwork. All right,
Awesome.
we've got my little cute guy that no one cares about. Yay.
Centigors are awesome. I'd love to see him on the table.
Yeah, so the Warhoof, he's a bit odd. So he's the only Beastman character that doesn't like get to have a toughness 5 version. He's cavalry. He can ambush. He can join up with your Centigor character, you know, with your unit. He can have some armor, a great weapon. He can get some mutations. He takes some magic items. He still has drunken and everything. He still has stomp attack. So he's essentially a 3 wound Centigor character. He can in a lot of ways act like a whole Centigor squad of 5 by himself. If you just
Mm-hmm.
give him a great weapon and a decent armor save and ambush, he can just basically do about as much as a whole unit of Centigor, and you just have him, or you can stick him in the unit. Either way, and Swift Strike. You know, what you'll see in the Beastman book, there's a lot of units that don't have it, so it's something to pay attention to when you can see it, because those are the units you might need to have threat projection. You're a melee
I
army
think
with
to
no
your
Swift
point,
Strike.
we've talked about this before. His actual stats and gear and mutation potential and points is actually really great value. I think it's everyone gets just thrown off by Drunken, that 1 in 6 chance that it won't go according to plan. Therefore, they just don't put him in the list. But 1 in 6 isn't that terrible when you think about the downsides of units that are frenzied or impetuous or whatever,
Stupid.
like or stupid. Like 1 in 6 isn't that bad. Plenty of games you'll go and nothing bad will ever happen. But again, it's for some reason this particular wording or combination of this rule, I think scares a lot of people away, because if you just look at the raw stats and potential of this guy for his points, he's a steal. He's a
So
great value for what his
we'll talk
potential
about
is.
Drunken later when we get to special rules, but you know, it's if you roll a 1, it's not that you don't move, and it's not that you have stupidity. It's that you get to be random movement d6, which if you ambushed and ran 8 inches so that you're 1 inch away from an enemy at the end of the turn, unless if they like ran away, you can fail that drunken test, and then use random movement to just contact somebody who now can't even react. So random movement can be interesting there. And then also, hey, if you roll a 6 on the drunken test, you get frenzy. Great.
Pretty great.
Why not?
Yep.
Also, there's a special weapon that's like a throwing spear, and it just feels like it was built for this dude. You just buy that, you get the throwing spear weapon, you put it on this guy, and you show up, and you're like, aha! And the only problem with that is that every single character is with skill 3. So,
Well,
meh.
to be fair, he is angry and drunken, and so aim is not their best.
Let's skill 4 Centigor win. That's what I'm gonna say. Okay.
There you go. All right, but we're on to infantry, we're on to core now, right? So on to infantry, on to the Bestigor.
Adorable. So they're the Bestigor because they're best. They're the best out of everybody.
Oh, Bestigor.
Yeah.
Bestigor. It's good.
So these are basically better than Chaos Warriors. That's the kind of way I think about it. They've got that bigger base size. They're heavy infantry. I mean, they have got less weapon skill, but they have more movement. And I would take that trade a lot of the time. Having movement 5 on an infantry unit means you can charge further. You have a more consistent charge. We've got strength 4, toughness 4. So these guys, they go to the gym. Okay, they're rocking some iron. We have high initiative, which doesn't matter if you're a great weapon, but it does matter for initiative tests. Okay, so that's fine. And pretty good leadership base, right? Which means they can operate away from the generals. They got that character in there, you know. These guys, I very much like them, especially when I'm taking if I'm taking a Beast Lord, you got to bring Bestigor, right? That's the way I think about it. And very rarely, there's nothing else in the Beastman book has this. We got Stubborn and Veteran. So these guys will actually hang around for a while. Why not?
Yeah.
You know, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, Stubborn's a solid rule, right, for allow you to hang out in combat, but Veteran, that re-rolling of leadership, that is powerful for so many things in the game. It's definitely one of the best defensive rules in the game, and Veteran is one of those rules that can shut down like certain things such as scream lists and such. Veteran just totally messes with the dice, skewing so hard. It's fantastic that they can take that.
In one of my games, I successfully baited out an overrun that left a unit of Empire Knights like 3 inches in front of my Bestigor. I then cast Battle Lust on this Bestigor unit, and it was about 6 wide. So each
Hmm.
guy has 2 attacks on this charge, rerolling to hit. I think the unit of Empire Knights had maybe like 8 or 9 knights, and there was one guy left after the Bestigor were done with them. They just massacred
Yep.
them horrifyingly.
Yeah, and I think it's the typical thing you're seeing in the Beastman army. They hit really hard. They have really good raw stats. Of course, it's only one attack, so it's not overly powered, but they're pointed appropriately. Heavy armor, so they're not going to be massively armored. But again, if they get the charge with great weapons or get to strike with them, they're going to do quite a bit of damage.
What I often do as well is I'll run them up the board, and I'm fine with losing the first round of combat. I'll use Stubborn, I'll fall back,
Yep.
reform to be about 10 wide, and then I've got a good frontage where you have to think, do you want to pursue into 10 of these dudes wide? So if I bring a unit of, 15, 16, even if you kill, 6 on the first round, now I'm going to have 10 wide still, right? Now you got to
Yeah.
fight all that.
And I think that's the biggest thing we're keeping in mind. You're building strategies here, like Evan's talking about. It's not about the first round of combat. And so much of people's strategies or methods are I have to break through with the first charge, crush the unit, make them flee, move on, so forth and so on. But stubborn is just no. It's just nope. It's not going to happen. You're just going to get pushed back that little distance. So you can build entire game plans and strategies around I'm going to absorb the charge and or bait something out, knowing that if as long as this unit's big enough they can't kill all the models, you're going to be where you want to be and you're going to control where the enemy is. So you're really setting up that next turn counter charge or right to hit him with something else. So this is a fantastic unit. Really, the more well I'm speaking the praises of veteran. Stubborn with this army and this list and this unit is actually the more powerful thing. It's super effective. It's
One
not
point.
about wiping them out the first round of combat. You got to think the big picture. You got to think multiple rounds, multiple turns, the counter positioning, the counter charging, the next turn follow up where, hey, now that gave, the Minotaurs time to get there, or that gave the Chariots time to get into position, and then you're going to crush them on the following,
Right.
the follow through.
And this unit does have Blood Rage, which means every time they take their Primal Fury test, if they pass it on a double, they become frenzied. So that one attack turns into 2. The Primal Fury test, if they have Leadership 10 from their Warband, so if they have Leadership 10 because they're ranks, this is now an 83% chance to pass and something like a 15% chance to get Frenzy. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I said it's one of the most fun armies to play, because that 15% when it comes up, it's memorable. It's like, oh, I'm going to do twice as much damage as you thought. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're really encouraged to take this in larger bricks, both for the stubborn to make sure you're going to be around, and for the warband benefits that you're going to get out of it.
Okay, so Gore. Gore are just incredibly cost effective. We talked about this before. We've got Warband, we've got Blood Rage, so we can, essentially when we take our Primal Fury test, if we pass doubles, we get Frenzy as well. That makes them just go from, additional hand weapons, we have 2 attacks each. Now we can be 3 attacks each if we roll doubles, right? Bestial Charge, so if we charge somebody, we get +1 strength if we go 3 inches or more. This is a great rule. I think this is one reason why this unit is amazing to run in little squads of like 8 to 12. Now, people do not do this, but I went to a tournament where I brought 2 units of 12 and I ran them in skirmish, and I basically just had them sit around waiting for essentially a juicy target to fly behind me or to go around my flanks. And now I charge, I got 2 attacks each. It's great. Ambush is only 1 point to buy, so we can have 2 or 3 of these units in your army, and maybe 2 of them you buy the ambush on. And you don't have to use it. You could just have it as an option. It's if you buy a unit of 10 or 12 and you just buy the ambush for them, now you can choose when you see a dwarf gun line, run ambush. If we see, Warriors of Chaos Army running at you, don't run ambush. And you just pick based on what you're going to see.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of utility there. That's the main thing here. By itself, this is not the anvil unit or the hammer unit, right? This is not going to control the battle lines, but because of the utility of skirmishing, ambush, its special rules, it's very flexible to deal with the various situations of if it's a gun line, I do this strategy. If it's an army that's going to try and fly behind me, I do this strategy. If I'm going to get flanked, I do that strategy, right? And that's why I think this unit is so great for its points, is it brings so much utility. Just if it would had even half of those rules and just was a skirmishing unit with 7 points, it's already very valuable unto itself, but it has all these other mechanics. So a very skilled player is going to get a ton of value out of this unit in whatever matchup they're going against.
Also, something to note is that the way Games Workshop points units is they make you pay points for every stat that you have. even if it doesn't work, or if it doesn't matter. So a lot of infantry has light armor or shields, and they don't get to use that very often because of so many AP2 attacks coming at them. This unit has no armor. So if you don't take the shields, for example, you just take the additional hand weapons, you don't have any armor. So all the time, all the points people spend buying AP for their units or taking, elite units won't matter versus me, right? And if you had light armor shield, you wouldn't get to use that anyway a lot of the time. So who cares? Why not just bring
rather
more
have
dudes?
the toughness 4 for sure.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. And you see that with other lists where the reality is the way the game is balanced right now, because there's so much AP1 in the game or AP2, that really light armor is almost pointless and heavy armor is okay, but often you don't want to spend the points on it, right? You really need to have a armor save of 4+ to 3+ for it to be applicable most of the game, which is why exactly right. You'd rather just not spend the points, and having it, especially if you have toughness 4, that's more often than not going to help you more than having that light or heavy armor would.
Yeah. And we can also buy magic banners. There's some amazing ones we'll find out later. One of them lowers all the armor saves within 6 inches. Well, guess what? If you don't have armor, this unit doesn't care. So now you can just lower everyone else's. Basically, like gives your unit AP1 because everyone who's within 6 inches of it has less armor.
It's huge. Yeah.
All right. So the Ungor are admittedly less exciting, but they're basically you're just, meat shields. We've got a whole bunch of, a little bit less stats here, but we're still movement 5. We can still be move through cover, open order, or skirmishers and warband. So we can still buff up our leadership, for example, with ranks. We still here. This is really interesting. They have chariot runners just by default. A lot of other units they have to be really elite, like Shadow Warriors or something, to have this. So this means your chariots can charge through them. So you can have Ungor herds screening out in front and chariots charging through them. If you have a chariot heavy army, I think Ungor herds are pretty mandatory. That just makes sense. You can take a squad of 10 with short bows, just run them at the enemy. You've got 50 points for just this little screen, and if you need to, you just flee from a charge and let them get run down so that the enemy will be in the perfect position. Think about it this way. 50 points for 10 Ungor, I'm very often spend 45 points for 5 Empire Archers. So that's half as many guys for basically the exact same stat line and purpose. Right?
Yeah, I think they're great, and in particular, I think it's because they have movement 5, not 4, that makes them just that meaningfully better. The delta of a 4 to 5 on movement is actually quite a big differentiator in the way the math works out when playing the game.
A lot of people might miss this or forget. Open order means that if you're ranked up with open order, you don't lose your rank bonuses when you're in terrain, when you're in difficult ground. So an Ungor herd can go sit in the forest and have their rank bonus and have their leadership be improved by their rank bonus, whereas if a goblin army runs into you and attacks you in the forest, they lose their rank bonus and they lose their leadership bonus because of it. So open order can be a big buff in terrain specific areas.
As long as you and your opponent remember that terrain is going to take away your rank bonus, which almost everybody seems to forget that rule.
Well, that's a big pet peeve of mine because I cast Tempest all the time and I love to be like, you don't get a rank bonus.
Well, you love to remind people, but
yeah,
most people do forget those rules.
So, Harpies. Wow. What do you say about Harpies? Like, what a weird unit that's just so cost effective for what it's trying to do. You have a fly 10, scout, skirmisher, swift stride, move through cover. They get 2 attacks because they're kind of like they have 2 claws. But all you really want is you just want to have a unit of 5 of these guys, or girls, more accurately, just flying around. Scouts are amazing. We already talked recently about how if you have a scout unit, you can just totally mess up the Royal Clan's Dwarf list. The Royal Clan's Dwarf list wins a lot of tournaments, but I think it gets really massively screwed up by a single unit of scouts.
You can't argue with its points. It really is that perfect point to effectively ratio. Again, it will die to ranged. I think that's its biggest disadvantage is it has no armor and no toughness, so ranged attacks will rip it apart. But again, in terms of utility, getting in the way, harassing your opponents, slowing things down, being at the right place at the right time to, again, control the battlefield through movement and positioning, not through attacking and damage. They are one of the best units of the game for being able to do that for points efficiency.
Yeah, very cheap. So basically 5 of these ladies cost you about as much as a Great Eagle for high elves, but they have more wounds. They're also really important to have as a way to threaten to run people down if they flee from you. So if you have Gore charging from the front, a lot of people will be like, okay, I'm just going to flee because you won't catch me. But if you have Harpies from behind, now if the Harpies catch them, they're dead. So now they have to hold, otherwise they're screwed.
Yep, sometimes the best place to put them if like, okay, I don't really want them to go into combat. I don't really want them to get in the way. It's not effective. Just flying behind the enemy's ranks. So you're behind their army for the follow-up turns. If they flee, get in the way. You want to chase them down, get in the way. Just being that fast and being able to go 360 and being behind the enemy unit is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. All right, so Minotaurs, we talked about them a little bit. Some fun facts here. We've got a monstrous infantry unit that actually has weapon skill 4. Almost all of them, like ogres and trolls, have weapon skill 3. So this is a
Three,
big
yeah.
defensive bonus. It really helps you because the average weapon skill of a good melee unit is 4. So that means you're going to not be hit as easily. The base strength of these guys is 5. So they basically have the best of trolls as well because trolls are strength 5. So these guys have the troll strength. 3 wound stuff is 4. That's standard. Initiative 3 is actually high for monster infantry. A lot of trolls and ogres have initiative 2.
Pretty
So,
slow.
especially if you charge and you're using a not using a great weapon, now you're initiative 6. That's actually pretty okay. Every
Hmm.
single Bretonnian knight is initiative 3 pretty much. Uh,
Yeah.
only the like, Grail knights and stuff and characters get to be a little bit higher than that. So that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, and so the only real downside I think is they're a little bit expensive. Ogres are like 10 points less each. Um, but these guys can either they're motley crew, so you can build them to have like one guy has really good armor and the other ones have less, so that they just magically somehow get to have the best armor save of the whole unit. But you can also do mix and match of great weapons, additional hand weapons, and shields to have
Hmm.
some guys that give them some better armor saves, some that have hit harder, some that have additional hand weapons for just more attacks. Right. The only downside is
Yeah.
the additional hand weapon. You lose your AP from foe render, so that's pretty
Yeah.
uncommon. People don't take that very much. They'll either take the great weapon or the hand weapon.
Yeah, I think in general, they're a fantastic unit. They're very effective. I think in general, monstrous infantry in the game are probably 5 to 8 points more expensive than probably they should be for their output. There are some exceptions. Ogres, I think, are more appropriately priced, but I feel like trolls, minotaurs, there are other monstrous infantry, some of the undead. I'd love to see them a little bit cheaper in the points, but again, very effective. I love their rules. I think they just need to be a few points less.
So it is possible here we can put one unit in ambush. So the only tricky thing about this is that if you want to take ambushing minotaurs, you almost need to take the beast lord to help them guarantee that they're going to show up more frequently.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit counterintuitive because if you take the Doombull as the general, then you can have the unit that you just kind of want in core. So now I very often do this, but I'll just take my 2 or 3 minotaurs as ambushers as a special unit so that my beast lord's the general, and they're just going to try to ambush behind you. And there's a lot of things that don't want to get charged in the rear by 2 minotaurs with hand weapon shield. I will
Yeah.
say though that the foe render rule combined with their only leadership 7 means that you really want to have some way to have a better leadership or a reroll on your Primal Fury, because otherwise you're only going to be leadership 7. You're going to fail that half the time, and if you fail Primal Fury, your AP of your hand weapon goes from 2 to 0, which is
Mhm.
awful. So I often take the banner on these guys that gives you reroll to your Primal Fury test, even though it's like
Mhm.
25 points. It's very much worth it on these guys.
Yeah, definitely makes a big difference. To your point, I think the main thing is you are spending, you start taking 3 or 4 of these guys, the points start getting up there in terms of how much you're investing in a unit. You want to make sure that unit's going to deliver, right? And so increasing those efficiencies of the Beast Lord for the ambush efficiency, ensuring that it's far more likely going to go off, or the banner to help with your Fury reroll, leadership roll. Effectively, that's what we're trying to do here is taking it raw. There is a lot more risk with those rules, random factor, and we're looking for strategies to help reduce the random factor so it will do what you want it to do when you want it to do it. That's really
Yeah.
what we're trying to
And in,
accomplish.
in a lot of ways, this unit is the opposite of that. It's going to do random stuff because if it passes Primal Fury, that could be great. If it passes on a double, they get to be frenzied and they go from 3 to 5 attacks each. So when that does happen for you, this unit is going to suddenly double its output almost. And you'd be like,
Huge.
wow. Or it could just fail that. So competitive players often will be taking something that's more consistent, like the Dragon Ogre, that's just always has the same strength, always has the same number of attacks, whatever, and
Yeah.
has a bit. And the main difference is they got more armor. The Dragon Ogre is only a little bit more expensive, but it's got another wound and a bit more armor, whereas the Minotaurs are a bit more random, but they do have a lot going for them as well. I think that if you take a Dark Magic Bray Shaman, take Minotaur. That just sounds amazing because if you get Battle Lust on these
Yeah.
guys, they will literally cut through anything. I think.
Yeah, I think to your point for the points to cost efficiency, the Dragon Ogre typically wins out because of the armor, for the
Right.
points to cost efficiency.
But
If
these
they
guys
were a
are a
little
core
more
unit.
points, which is great. So, right, pros and cons, but that doesn't help you if you're playing Wars of Chaos and you
I
can't
also
pick one.
expect we will probably see a lot of alternate ways to play Minotaur in the Arm of Infamy. There could be an elite version, which maybe like Web Skill 5 or something. There could be a skirmisher version, where similar to like Skinwolves, where we have the units of like 2 or 3 of
Yeah.
these guys in skirmish. That could be
Mm-hmm.
wild. So just pay attention because the Army of Infamy will potentially be giving a lot to this unit.
It's exciting. So happy to see a Minotaur list.
Yeah,
But anyway, let's move on. Centigors.
we already went over how much I love these guys. So
They're cool.
what if light cavalry was strength 4 and toughness 4?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can ambush, okay? Only 1 point each. And then we can
Mm-hmm.
have great weapons,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So
And
what I
they're
love about
fast.
this,
They're movement 8, right?
yeah,
And they have Swiss stride, don't they?
yes,
They're very fast.
yeah. So we can show up in ambush behind your lines. We can move 8 inches and then do a free open order pivot. So I love to go next to someone's battle line like this, 8 inches forward, 90-degree pivot, and now I'm facing your flank. You either have to move towards the rest of my army to run away, or back up, or turn to face the the Centigor, but now you're exposing your flank to something else. We talked about how good flanking is in many of our other videos. Well, a lot of the time with the way it works on the table, you can't really flank people unless if you're ambushing, or you fly. The only way to really ambush to flank somebody is for them to either screw up or for you to have special rules to let you get behind them.
Yeah, totally fair. Yeah, and that's very powerful. It's just a huge threat that they really make you have to deal with them. So I do think Beastman players are sitting on this more often than they should. I think there's a lot of potential play here, and I think hopefully at some point in the future we're going to see Beastman generals start to experiment more with this unit because I think it has
Yeah.
a lot of potential.
And then the drunken rule, if you do roll the 1, you get random movement D6. If you ambushed, you could be 1 inch away from your opponent, and then you just get to do your random movement charge. Or if you roll the 6, which is just as common, you get frenzy, and now your unit doubles its attack damage. I think the fact that Beastmen can get so much frenzy without having to have it be at the start of the turn is huge because it can help prevent your units from being totally uncontrollable. A Mark of Khorne Marauders are totally uncontrollable. Your opponent gets to decide what they're going to do. But if you have Beastmen units that just sometimes get frenzy, you get all the damage bonus when that happens, but you don't have all of this bad movement shenanigans.
Yeah, there's a much greater potential for things going in your favor without the opponent taking control away, which is exactly the combination you want.
It's tons of fun. Okay. Dragon Ogres are awesome. I think everybody knows this.
And the models are really cool too.
We were talking about how a Minotaur was 47 points. So for only 9 more points, we get the same stat line except a little bit faster movement and another wound. So the points per wound is a lot lower. These guys also can cap out their armor a lot higher. They can have heavy armor and they have armor height too. So that's a 3+ armor save when you combine that. And
That's
then
huge.
we could still have the great weapon here where now we just have strength 7 with 3 attacks each. And then we'd have 2 stomps. 2 stomps.
2 stomp, not 1.
A
2.
Thunder Tusk has 3. This guy has 2.
Per model.
Yeah.
Per model.
They also have ensorcelled weapons, which gives them the ability to then switch their great weapon out for a magic weapon. So if you have some ethereal unit, they're like, we don't care. Wild. Totally wild. I think the one thing, a big downside, they have immune to psychology, so they can't flee from anything. So they're a little bit less of a screening unit. I think one of the big problems people have with Dragon Ogres is they take 2 or 3 units of 3, and they're like, these guys are cavalry. I'm going to put them on the flank. Wrong. These guys are your front line, middle of your army unit that just runs up the middle. If you put them on the flank, they don't get to fight. They don't get to make it there because they don't have swift stride. They take too long to make it there. This is a center line, front line unit. So I don't see you taking a big unit of Dragon Ogres, like let's say 5 of them, if you're also taking 40 Gore. That's you pick one. You have one of those 2 things as your middle, and everything else is running around.
Pros and cons, but definitely see it more effective on the table. A lot of people originally were trying to take them as singles or as more utility of flanking or support, but I agree. I think their potential comes out much stronger if they're either the main anvil of the army in the center or the hammer that's sitting right next to the anvil. Again, towards the center of your battle lines, because again, they hit really hard. Their movement's pretty good at 7, but they also are going to have that wide frontage once you start having 3, 4, etc. in the front, and they don't have Swiss stride, right? So you really do want to get them where in the thick of it to make sure that you're going to get hopefully more than one round of combat out of them throughout the course
Yeah.
of the game.
I see these guys as a really strong, basically like a shield. In fact, I think these guys are actually the anvil. Like, you don't have any other 3+ armor save in your whole army pretty much. So if you want something to just hold the line, that's what I think Dragoners are pretty good at. They don't have stubborn,
Mm-hmm.
so the big weakness they have is you just roll that 11 on your break check and it's just, okay, they're gone.
Yeah,
Um,
but the T4 with a 3 up armor save is huge with 4 wounds, and again, it's people are going to kill one. It's hard to chew through 8 3 up armor save T4 wounds to take 2 of them down. It does happen, but it's less common. So this is why we're starting to see those larger, those units of 5 or 6 of them as the anvil in the center, because there's very few things in the game that can chew through all that, especially then if you start comboing it with a Doombull or a character, all of a sudden, yeah, you might kill 1 or 2, but there's a lot that's going to come back, and they're eventually going to
yeah.
chew through you and do
It's
some
it's
damage.
also a bit of a dragon meta thing where you need some unit that can sit there and actually eat a charge from the dragon and have some way to hit back. And
Mm-hmm.
5 Dragoners in a single line, the dragon might kill 2, but it
Mm-hmm.
probably won't, and then it'll be hit with 4 of them in return fire.
Yeah.
That is a lot.
With strength 7 with great weapons, they absolutely
I
can
will
do
say,
some
by the
damage.
way, if you're going to do that, if you're going to take a unit of more than 2 or 3, you do not take a shard attack because you don't want to have to be ability to be challenged and then they
Challenged
get to
out.
lose a whole guy fighting back because he's the champion and has to refuse. So you generally take either a big unit with no shard attack or you take the shard attack by himself running around solo.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good strategy. Cool.
Warhounds are boring.
Yeah, well, they're not as exciting, certainly, in the Beastmen army. They're certainly more compelling in the Warriors of Chaos list because, again, it's filling out a slot that the roster doesn't typically have with that speed, very cost effective and such. But again, the Beastmen army has so many options that fill in those slots, either
Yeah.
with more utility with the Gores, right, and Ungors, or the Furies, right, in terms of getting in the way 360. They just offer a lot more, very effective, and they're very fast. Or the Razor Gourd if you want to go for something that's just a lot more durable. So that's where I think with
Yeah.
this army roster, you typically won't see the Hounds because there are just other units that are just going to offer you a lot more.
Yeah, I think that in every Warriors of Chaos army, you see 2 to 3 units of 5 Chaos Warhounds for
Pretty
30-ish
typical.
points each. Um,
Mhm.
but in every Beastman army, you see 3 units of Razor Gore instead. And I think they do the same
It's
thing,
so
but
good.
better.
Mhm.
That's pretty
Yeah,
much it.
I agree. Mhm.
The only thing that Razor Gore can't do is they're not going to be in a marching column. So the Warhounds you can stick 2 by 3 deep, and then you can just be like, I'm in marching column. I can just run 21 inches instead of 14. But I don't think you need to do that very often.
Yeah, but the toughness of the Razor Gore, but and often I actually like that his frontage is much smaller.
Yeah.
That's going to allow him to squeeze into other places and fit where a 5 wide Hound unit is a much wider footprint. So I think
Yeah.
again there is just a lot of reasons why people are going to take them. And for the
And
points,
a Razor
they're
Gore,
built.
if you charge a bunch of Sisters of Avalon with a Razor Gore, they have to wound you on 6s, and then you can wound them on like 2s, and you have some impact hits. Like,
Yep, it's
it's
good.
really good at just saying, oh, you're a toughness 3 unit with strength 3. Goodbye.
Yep. All right, so we're on to chariots.
Yeah, so we have 2 chariots here. They can also be the character mounts. They're both heavy chariots. They can both have
Hmm.
the strength 5, d6, d6 plus 1 for Tuskor. That's
Hmm.
quite a lot. And d6 plus 2 for the Razor Gore chariot. A lot of impact hits here. They both have first charge as well, so they can remove rank bonuses on people. Don't forget that this exists. Okay? And we have 1 Bestigor crew with a great weapon and 1 Gore crew with a spear. That's pretty cool. It takes a little bit longer to roll it, but you get a bit of a strength 6 attack no matter what, and then a strength 4 or 5 strength 4 attack when you on the charge, right? They do have Primal Fury, so they can actually get those rerolls ones as well. These are just pretty solid chariots. The only thing I'll say is that the Tuskor chariot is about the same price as a Boar chariot, and the Boar chariot is toughness 5. So you're paying a little bit for having not having impetuous, where you're
Yeah,
basically very similar to an Orc Boar chariot though. Otherwise,
which is huge though, not having
yeah,
impetuous. And again, they also do have some armor. They do have a 4 up save. It's Again, once we're talking 4 up, 3 up, that is meaningful and will come into play and be helpful. Keep in mind, chariots, again, they're not frontline units. You're typically not, even 2 chariots charging into something, unless it's a small unit, is typically not going to be enough. They're great as support. They're great as, you right, you want them. These are the things you want next to the dragon ogres, next to the minotaurs, next to the big gore things. It's right. It's these combined with something else is when the chariots really shine. They're not solo hunting things down by themselves in particular, because
Yeah,
faster things can outmaneuver them. It's when
and the
you
trick
know you're
is,
going to Bestigor pull something out right with your stubborn, and then whack, these are going to come in the next turn. You're really looking for the combos with these chariots.
yeah, and that's the trickiest thing about it. It's very difficult for the positioning. You don't have counter charge, so if you get caught out by something, you generally just have to flee if it charges you, right? But on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
you then that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to catch someone out of position. Let's say they had a frenzied unit, so they had to overrun, and now they're in a really bad spot. And you can just pummel them with this stuff. Pretty small
Yep.
frontage. You're 50 mil wide. That's the same as a single dragon ogre, and you can do all these impact hits. So if you can get 2 or 3 of these in there, they're gonna outperform a dragon ogre. Okay, so we're into kind of those monster section. It's gonna be a pretty long section because Beastmen just have so many monsters. Love the Shaggoth. We have a leadership 9 monster. He's got armored hide 2, so he can have the 3 up armor save base just like everybody else. But pretty uniquely, we have a non-character monster who you can buy either the black and plate or I think that's the main way. The main way is to buy the black and plate. You can also buy the item that gives you magic resistance 2, but you can give him a 2+ armor save. So Dragon Ogre Shaggoth 2+ armor save. That's an amazing unit for charging things that want to shoot you. If you have a bunch of like poison night goblins, it won't matter how many poisons they get if you have a 2+ save against it. Really,
Yep. Absolutely.
it's great. And then you can buy the magic items and mutations. So the only thing that here to point out as well, I love this. You have Storm's Call. He has a magic spell that he can cast, and if you cast it, every unit within 6 inches, including friends, takes the D3 strength 4 hits. But more than that, you can cast this, and if you hit dragon ogres with it, they get an extra attack and initiative. So you supercharge your dragon ogres by hurting them.
It's cool.
Very cool.
Super cool combo. Mm-hmm.
I have almost killed a dragon ogre with this once before. My own guys, just blowing them up with that. It's great.
Worth it.
It was worth it. Jabberslythe, we talked about this a little bit earlier. So the big problem here, I think, is that it's a toughness 5 monster for like 195 points. The gigantic chaos spine is 6 wounds, strength 6, toughness 6 for less points than this.
Yeah, I think that's really where it is, where it really feels stat wise, it is on the monster side, more of that mid tier monster in terms of his profile, right? It is, it's higher than like a mana core mid tier typical thing in terms of the stats, but only slightly. In some cases, it doesn't hit that dragon or above range, and so that's where the points for it don't feel quite right for what you're getting out of its special rules or its stat line. It really feels it would have fit in great around that 160, 155 points. I think we'd see it a lot more often, but this is where we're at.
So it does have a couple wacky things. It's got poison attacks. It hurts enemy units that start, it starts its turn near, so you can fly this behind stuff and just hurt things with Maddening Aura. D3 strength 3 hits is nothing all that crazy, but the no armor save means this can just eat some knights pretty decently, and it still does it while you're in combat. So you can just go, let's see, hold on, including units engaged in combat. Yeah, so it's kind of like a little bit of a scream. I mean, it's only strength 3, but it does it to every unit nearby, so that's fine. And it hurts people that hurt it, and it has poison and it has AP 2. So I think this thing's fine. The real problem is if you have a large target monster that's toughness 5 with 5 wounds and no regen save, it's really easy to shoot this thing to death. So it'll be like, cool, I brought a Jabberslythe. I really want to send it at you. Most armies will be able to shoot this thing to death in 1 turn if they want to. Whereas the gigantic chaos spawn is like twice as hard to kill.
Yep, for sure. Mm-hmm. So again, really love it, and the model is so cool. It's just a question of there's just
I'm gonna bring it. I'll bring one. It's at some point. I have to fall out of love with the Shaggoth for a little while, but I'll bring one.
Yep.
Cockatrice is even weirder. So this one is toughness 5, but only 4 wounds.
this has been around for forever. I mean, I don't even remember the last time they updated. Well, they did update the model, so there is a new. I say update the model. The updated model is pretty old at this point, but it's. I love the model. I don't think I've ever actually seen it on the table though.
It is.
You know,
It's just a weird flying chicken type thing. And then you
Mhm.
have to buy like the decent upgrades. I think that if it was
But it's
170 and
chicken
came with
that
them, it'd be
turns you to
okay.
stone.
That's true. It does have Stony Stare, which is initiative test. Though, yeah, they have to take the initiative test, or they take some hits basically.
Yeah,
Um, that's weird. It can have an acid breath weapon, but only if you pay 20 points for it, which is weird.
that's a lot. Yeah.
I think this thing would be amazing if it was half the cost. It would be like
Hmm.
everyone would be taking it constantly, but 170 for a 4 wound. Remember, 4 wounds, toughness 5. That's like what the Chariot has, and the Chariot was 120 points, but this thing has no armor. Or it has heavy armor, but the Chariot has a 4 up armor save, so the Chariot is just more survivable for a lot less points.
And I think we see that a lot with a lot of these mid-tier monsters, whether it's the cockatrice or the chimera or some of the other ones. It's just for their stat profile and the rules they're providing, it feels like they're priced closer to a lower cost heavy monster. I mean, it's not that far off of a dragon right at this point, and it just doesn't make sense, the ROI what you're getting for it. I agree. These mid-tier monsters, solo monsters, I love them. I'd love to see more on the table, but often they this should really be closer to that, right, 120 130 range. I
It
think we'd
makes one.
see
It makes fewer stomp attacks than a Dragon Ogre.
yeah, I think we'd see a lot more of it if it was around that 120 points range, but I think
Also,
at
could it maybe
170
just
it's just
not be a
it's too
large
high.
target because this makes it a lot easier to shoot? If it was not a large target, it could get cover. It could hide behind things. I don't, this thing isn't very big. I don't know why it's a large target.
Well, no, the more recent the model update is actually quite large.
It's like this big. It's like
Okay,
an
I don't know how
ogre
to frame ref.
size.
No, it
Maybe
is absolutely bigger than an
it's on
ogre.
a 50 by 50 though, right?
Yeah, but it's tall, it's tall, it's tall. Anyway, doesn't matter. Hopefully we'll see more of them in the future.
So Cygor competes with the Hell Cannon for the worst unit in the game. So you've got something that's like a giant that is a stone thrower, but it costs twice as much as a stone thrower for having essentially the exact same rules, except it's just shorter range. So like maybe it'd be worth about 100 points if it had this, right? That's fine. That's about a stone thrower. And then there's this Soul Eater and Ghost Sight, which basically don't do anything because they only really affect wizards. But because you're an
Mhm.
artillery unit that can just hurl this rock, um, you're never going to be near the enemy wizard. The wizard's going to be too far away from you. So you're not moving towards it and still shooting, right? So you're not going to use these rules practically ever.
Yeah, yeah, I love the model. It's really cool. It was clear they were trying to make a thematic variant to the effectively the Beastman Giant, right? This is the variant of it that comes in the same kit. You can build it in two different ways. Really cool model, and the whole concept is like it's one eye. It can't see normally. It only sees wizards, and it's about wizard hunting. Unfortunately, I feel that they could have created stronger rules to allow him to hunt wizards here. And certainly, right, he's got a good stat profile, and his points aren't crazy for stat profile. But in terms of his purpose of hunting down wizards and/or being an artillery piece, those really
Yeah.
aren't delivering where you'd want them to be for that price point.
I think that if it was weapon skill 3 and toughness 6 and had D6 stomp to be worth this price, or if you're going to keep the stats, he should be like 120. Like, we're talking half the price. Like, it's at the very least, he doesn't really hurt himself as much. It does say that if you roll a misfire, you just lose a wound, so you don't blow
Mm-hmm.
yourself up like the Hell Cannon.
Yeah, again,
Hell
it's all
Cannon,
relative. If it was
ugh.
stronger, if you think about what is the cost of a stone thrower, right? If he was a stone thrower plus a giant, and that was it, and he didn't have those other special rules, and he was priced in that closer to that 130 or even 140 range, I think we'd see him very reasonably. But I think you're paying for a lot of additional of those soul eater rules
Yeah.
and other rules that are really jacking up the points cost to the point where people just aren't taking them.
Let me reroll the scatter die if I'm targeting the bombardment at a wizard unit, right?
That'd be cool.
Why doesn't my like my rock that I'm throwing like home in on a wizard? Like just this big boulder's just coming right at him, you know?
Yeah, so cool model. Hopefully, we'll see some balance updates to him in the future. So we'll see him
Right.
hopefully more on the table then.
So Chaos Giant is basically the exact same thing as the giant from Orcs and Goblins, except that the Chaos Giant can buy a regen save for 20 points, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing, or armor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just buy these two
Yep.
upgrades, you're a lot more survivable than a regular giant. However, I do think that a lot of the other monsters are just a lot of fun, a lot stronger and more consistent. The
Giants are
giant
pretty
is
fun.
just
Well, yeah. The giant is not consistent. That is totally fair. In terms of fun, being able to yell at your opponent, belly flop, headbutt, swing with a club is just pure fun. So giants are really for those people who really get into their armies and are going to have just a great. Somebody who takes two giants is just you're going to have a good game with that person. They're not necessarily going to be the most competitive list, but you're going to have a great time. And they're really really fun. But yeah, that's the problem with the giant. Actually, the line for the cost and his potential damage output is totally worth the
I
points. It's
mean, a
that
lot of Orcs and Goblins
inconsistency of
players take
you
two
don't know what it's going to
giants.
do. Yeah, because it's just
So
awesome, and Orcs and Goblin players are awesome people.
that's true.
Um, but yeah, and I think the biggest difference to your point, why do you heavy armor? We just said earlier we were trash talking heavy armor. Really, why it's really, really effective on a giant to have heavy armor is because poison is one of the most effective ways, mass poison attacks, to take down big monsters, and big monsters typically have very little armor. So for the fact that a giant can typically have no armor, all of a sudden for 10 points, you can have that 5-up save. That 5-up save is going to make all the difference in the world in being able to survive at least one, if not two volleys of that poison attack, versus if you didn't have it, you would drop pretty quickly.
Right. Okay, we have all these special rules. Okay, and then we have a Gorgon. So I think that there's a ton to love here, and then one thing that is a big problem. So we've got a better weapon skill than most of the other monsters, 4. Strength 6, toughness 6, wound 6. Sometimes I just wonder if they really even put much thought into the monster. And it's like, it's a big monster. It just gets 6 across the board, right? 5 attacks. Okay. Leadership 9. Great. It does have all of the crazy special rules that basically Minotaurs have, except it's already frenzied, so it's going to get +2 attacks there, so it's 7 attacks. But now it's frenzied, so unlike all the other Beastmen stuff I was talking about, this one just can be led around the battlefield constantly. So I think that if you take a Gorgon, you pretty much just have to stick a Razor Gore right in front of it to prevent it from charging at dumb stuff constantly. And then you have to babysit it, and basically just whenever you want to charge, you have to send the Razor Gore and the Gorgon at the same thing. And that's a big problem. Stubborn is lovely on this thing because amazing. You can get like flank charged by something, lose 2 wounds, and you don't just run away immediately. You can just back up and then just fight them again. Why not? I constantly forget to do this. You can actually eat people.
Because it's amazing.
Well, it's because you eat people, and it's not in the combat phase. It's in the command phase. So you eat people if you're locked in combat for turn after turn. You can start eating people, and you can
Well,
heal
you need a snack. You get hungry, right? That's the thing, right?
So the big ticket item here, I think, is that the attacks from a Gorgon have Killing Blow and Monster Slayer. That's great. But you know what else is great? A Tomb Scorpion that does the same thing, and it costs like 60 points.
Yep.
So when you have this big guy, doesn't have Swift Stride, right? He doesn't have Skirmisher because he's not running in every direction, and he has Frenzy. It's pretty hard to get this thing to actually charge a dragon. Like, how are you going to do that? The dragon has to let you charge it.
Yeah, it's too fast. That I think that's always the big downside with the big monsters. I love them so much, but when you're chasing dragons or things with fly, you're never going to catch it unless it wants you to catch it. That being said, if you're keeping it away from your army by keep positioning it in areas where the dragon's not charging in, because if it does, you're going to get a counter it. So sometimes it's not about catching the dragon. You're always chasing the dragon. Sometimes it's not about catching the dragon. It's just about keeping the dragon out of optimal positions and in zone control. And so you're like, wow, that's a lot of points, Mike, to spend 200 points to just be trying to keep the dragon at bay for 1 or 2 turns. But at the same time, the dragon's a lot more than 200 points, right? And if you're keeping him away from your army for 1 or 2 turns, that's actually huge in what its potential is.
Right, and I'm just comparing it against the regular giant. So the giant has D6 stomps, and this one only has D3. And the giant's unbreakable, where this guy has stubborn. So the giant is definitely more durable. It's got heavy armor and regen if you buy that. It's cheaper, has more stomp attacks. So unless if you're using essentially the Monster Slayer and Killing Blow, I feel like the giant kind of does a bit more for a little bit cheaper.
It's the Killing Blow. That's the big thing. Doesn't it have Monstrous Killing Blow too?
Yeah,
right?
Monster Slayer and Killing Blow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you want to take this, because it's got enough attacks, right? If it can survive a round or 2 of combat, odds are you're going to get one of those 6s in. Yeah, the threat is huge.
So we're done with the units. Remember that most of these characters and some of the unit champions can buy Mutations. Slug Skin
So
is the
let's talk
most
about some of the
expensive.
highlights,
Yeah, the
right? You talked
highlights
about slug
here
skin like 6 times.
we
So
did.
tell us what else? Why slug skin and what else here is really
I
stand
mean,
out to you?
-1 to hit. Oh, your whole army generally has pretty decent weapon skill. If you just make it even harder, look, if Bestigor are being hit on a 5+, they're gonna win that combat. Okay,
Yep.
I don't care what you
And I
charge
know
them
that
with.
-1 to hit doesn't sound like a lot, but keep in mind most things in old world don't have rerolls to hit.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're rolling very few dice, typically for attacks in old world, and you don't get rerolls, that -1 could be massive in terms of the delta on the output. So it's a lot more powerful than in a game of 40k or OS, right? So an old world -1 or +1 is huge on the dice.
So we do have Gouge Tusk. This is an interesting one. You often see this when a character wants to buy a magic weapon that doesn't really have AP base. So we can just, for 30 points, we can just kind of fix our magic sword. Often it's the Giant Blade. So Giant Blade for 30
Yep.
points has no AP. That's a big problem with it. Take Gouge Tusk. Now it does. Great. Or you just stack
Yep.
this on top of your Great Weapon or on top of your Primal Fury hand weapon. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
AP1 or AP3, depending on whether you pass it or not.
And AP3 is huge. For the most part, right? That's going to rip apart
Yeah.
almost all armor that you're going to face in the game. Mm-hmm.
So Gnarled Hide is amazing for giving either like your infantry beast lord, your infantry Doombull, or your infantry, for example, a Minotaur champion additional armor.
Mm-hmm.
Gives them
Mm-hmm.
another armor save for 15 points. Nice. I talk about Uncanny Senses, pretty cheap for just a little more initiative. And then a Many Limb Fiend. This one's a bit worse than the Chaos one because the +1 attack goes to your hand weapon. But remember, a lot of the characters have AP2 on their hand weapon as long as they pass Primal Fury. So
Yep.
it's not bad.
Yeah, but Gnarled Hide in particular, it's very cost effective. And again, while the army doesn't have a ton of armor inherently, if you want to build an armor, a defensive character, this is one of those utility pieces that does allow you to do that, at least for one character when you stack up magic armor and all these other things. You have definitely some opportunities there to make at least one, if not two, defense focused characters, if that's what you're going for.
Right. And one last thing, the Rune of Beast Ascendant's probably a pretty good thing to take if your Beast Lord General is on a chariot. Because if he's on a chariot, he's leadership 8, and he doesn't have the ranks to help improve that at all. And then if you want to have units of Gore and Ungor nearby, not have anything worse than leadership 8, right? Then maybe this would be a decent pick.
You definitely do not want to have an army with less than leadership 8.
Yeah. So I was talking about earlier the Hunter's Spear. That's the throwing attack, magic, multiple wounds 2 through and through, strength 6. So this is a bolt thrower, but you only have Ballistic 3 on your guys, and you only have so many magic item points to spend. So
I mean, it's awesome, but that ballistic skill 3, once you move right, and the range is pretty good, 24, but suddenly you're going to be needing, 5s or 6s to hit, and the reliance just gets really low.
yeah, you only lose the -1 from you. It doesn't have Ponderous, so that's fine.
That's helpful.
Yeah,
Great.
most of the
Continue.
other magic weapons aren't seen very much. It's
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I think they're just not
they're
quite worth
not
it.
bad.
Yeah.
I think it's just that the core ogre blade and things from the common magic items are just more effective. And to be fair, that's true with a lot of armies. Seeing the ogre blade and some of those core magic items are just so good for what they do that they're common to see, and that's true with Beastmen as well.
So both of the armors I think are pretty useful. Blackened Plate is the full plate, so it lets you upgrade a character from usually heavy armor to full plate and give them a 3+ ward against flaming attacks. You very often see this either on a Shartak or a Minotaur champion or on
Mm-hmm.
the Dragon Ogre
Mm-hmm.
Shaggoth, or if you're going to take either the Doombull or the Beast Lord, put this on there, and now they're often getting to the 2+ armor save, and everyone else won't have that.
Yep.
The Pelt of the Dark Young almost does the same thing. It's going to be improve your armor save by 1, so if you already had heavy armor, there you go, and it gives you magic resistance 2. So magic resistance 2 we've seen is very, very worth it at about 20-point price point. So the question is 20 additional points for that other armor point, is that worth it? So maybe, especially if you want to have both of these things.
It just depends, right? And exactly right. I think typically at most this army could deck out 2 characters with a meaningful defensive profile is typically where the combos kind of max out. So there is certainly the ability to do more than one, which is why, hey, by default you're probably going to go with Blackened Plate, but if you're trying to go for the 2 character combo, that's where the pelt probably comes into play.
Yeah, I think Pelt of Dark Young maybe on like a wizard who's then in the unit Especially the Great Bray Shaman, he can use his Bray Staff to give up a 5+ armor save. So this can then make it a 4+ at least if you want to go into the defensive and give your unit MR2. It's fine.
MR2 is if it's a unit that's critical to your strategy, it's very powerful to have MR2 on a unit.
Yeah. So here's a bit of a bummer. The Dark Heart is cool. I think that they decided to do this to give you a way to, instead of ward saves or regen saves, they just give you a 25-point item to heal a wound. However, you have to not die in one turn of shooting or combat to be able to actually eat this. And you can just buy the Potion of Healing for 35 points, and that's D3 wounds instead of 1. So if this thing was 15 points, I think you would see them and it'd be great. But it's just a little bit too much to preserve that much of your special points allotment for like a maybe item. Because what if you just die in the one turn? You didn't stick around long enough to eat the hearts.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think mechanically what it's doing is solid. It's just priced a little too high.
Yeah. And then we have amazing banners. So Totem of Rust, this is what I was saying, it's great on the Gore block. Everything nearby has -1 to armor save. However, the Gore don't have armor, so who cares? Put it on them. It's almost like giving that whole unit AP1, and helps your other characters and stuff attack that unit for less armor as well. It makes things like knights really question whether they want to go charge the Gore and have no armor or something, have less armor.
Again, think about those combos, right? It's not about them running in and saying, hey, by ourselves we give you -1 so someone can take you down. It's that combo of, hey, they're to the side of the Dragon Ogres, or they're to the side of that Bestigor unit, right? And you're going to get that 1-2 combo off where, exactly right, those knights or Pegasus knights where, hey, they're not going to punch through in one turn. They're still going to be stuck there with that anvil. Now you can position where your unit is, so it just affects them or doesn't affect yours. And there's a lot of really great strategies you could pull off here with interesting combos, but you need to be thinking 2 or 3 layers deep, not just about this unit has to punch through. You have to be thinking about the combos.
I think Manbane comes up a lot as well at -1 to their leadership. So if you just try to win on combat resolution, try not to get hurt as much. In particular, if you have a one of the best things about Slugskin is that if anyone tries to fight you, they won't do as much damage as they expect, and then you might win on combat res because they just didn't do very much damage. They'll send in a big unit of Graveguard or something into your Gore block, and they'll kill 2 of you, and they'll be like, "What? What happened? It's because you didn't hit me, right?"
Yep. But of course, the -1 leadership is less applicable to undead and such. So
well,
again,
is it because they have so many leadership-based healing and stuff abilities? So if there was some way to just get that nearby, maybe you can help them fail.
Characters have that, not the units themselves.
Yeah.
So it is harder to get that combo off, which is why I think it's a cool standard. But for 40 points, it is contextual.
Yeah, so if it was 20, it would definitely be.
I think it would be an auto take if it was 20. Yeah.
So
at that point.
This is an auto take for pretty much the Vitriolic Totem to give a unit poison. I love doing this for the Gore unit because they often have a ton of attacks, but they are like strength 3 if they didn't charge. So poison, that's great. I know a lot of people are loving the idea of putting this on a BSB and then sticking them in a unit of Ungors with bows. That's very risky, I think.
Yeah, pros and cons, but in general, if you could give an entire unit poison, period, whether it's melee, if they have a lot of attacks, or ranged, it's very powerful. So it's definitely, I think, something you should be taking pretty much every game. And it's a question of how are you best utilizing it and how are you structuring your army to make sure that your unit with poison actually gets to pull this combo off more than once. Right, that's the goal.
And then finally, I think the Banner of Outrage is very often overlooked, but like I said, when your Minotaurs are leadership 7 and they really need to pass the Primal Fury to work, I think you take this. That's the way I think about it, because I think about, hey, if I'm going to buy my Minotaurs great weapons instead, then I'm losing out on that better initiative, and I might as well just have the Dragon Ogre who does the similar thing. So instead, I take units of Minotaurs with Hand Whip and Shield and Banner of Outrage, try to just make sure I reroll that. Hopefully, I re-roll the leadership check into a double, and then I have Frenzy.
Yep. And again, re-rolls are hard to come by.
But you can't re-roll this if you pass it the first time. So if you pass it and it's not a double, you can't re-roll it again. Unlike a Veteran, I think you can.
Why not? It says a unit carrying the banner...
Because you can't re-roll a success, right? If you pass it, you can't re-roll it, can you?
It doesn't say if you fail. It says you may re-roll your test.
Yeah, but in the core rulebook, rerolls can only apply to fails. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So there's a specific exception to this for the BSB, so that if you pass your leadership test with the Battle Standard Bearer, you can still re-roll it into a potentially different result if you want to. But that's an exception to the rule where normally if you pass a check, you can't just re-roll until you get something different, potentially. So there's a couple of interesting ones here. We don't see that often, but I think they're plenty. They're very good. So the Skin of Man here lets a shaman or a chieftain show up as a scout. I think that's amazing. So if you put this on a low-level wizard and you scout them up behind some terrain or something, you can start dispelling early. You can start throwing out Vile Tide early once you're going to move out of the terrain. The only problem is, who are you going to be scouting with? The only real option is some harpies to help block for you.
Rerolls. In some situations, the rolls may allow you to re-roll the dice. This is exactly what it sounds like. Pick up the dice and roll it again. You must accept the result of the re-roll, even if it is worse than the first roll. No single die can be re-rolled more than once, regardless of the source of the re-roll. If you re-roll multiple dice, you must re-roll all of the dice unless regarding the re-roll specifies otherwise. No, there is no rule that says you have to fail in order to use re-rolls.
Okay, so then I guess this manages it better.
Yeah, if you roll it and you're like, well, I passed, but I didn't get my doubles or whatever, you absolutely may choose to roll the dice again and try and pull it off.
Okay, there are other items, not this one. There are other items that say you can re-roll when you fail, blah, blah, blah. Like,
right,
I think Gleaming Pennant, I think maybe in Empire says that, but this one doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, that might be a small nuance that players missed that does make it more powerful, that I really want to get that double, roll the dice again and try and get it. Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple powerful arcane items. However, I think the obvious just leader, in fact, it's one of the best arcane items in the game, is the Hag Tree Fetish. And the problem is that people will basically, build their whole army around this. If you take it, you now have to roll your spells. You don't get to take Lore Familiar, right? But you get to reroll to wound with magic missiles, and you have a magic missile in the core, Beastmen rules that has an amazing reason to need reroll because it's usually wounding on 6s. So rerolling a 6+ into another 6+ almost doubles the damage. So the idea is I get the spell off, and now I double how much happens from it.
And again, rerolls are so hard to come by. It's super powerful.
So special rules, we talked about Drunken. Again, on a 1, you get random movement. Oh, it's random d6 plus 2. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's actually that's fine. If you come in from an ambusher and then you fail this on the second turn, you roll this 1, that's on average 5 inch that you get to make a charge. And the person doesn't get any reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So the only problem with Drunken is if you put these guys not in ambush and you just run them up the flank and you fail it, then you can't move where you want to move. Fine, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think it doesn't affect ambushing very much at all. We talked about the foe render. So if you pass Primal Fury, you get AP2 on your hand weapon. Minotaurs have this. All of the melee characters have this. The impact hits from Minotaurs are AP1. Great. Mm-hmm. Love that.
Even better. Mm-hmm.
I think Blood Rage is probably the most fun. So if you pass Primal Fury on a double, you get to be frenzied. Great.
Even better. Love it.
If you make a charge with the Gore, then pass Primal Fury on a double, you're now Strength 4 with Frenzy. Love it. Yep. And then Blood Greed is the one where you get +2 attacks and +1. However, it does slow. So you're so busy eating the corpses that you have a worse pursuit move. So often.
Well, it takes a lot of effort to eat a corpse, right? It's a lot of very focused.
Yeah. Okay. Gaze of the Gods is the same as Warriors of Chaos. I think everyone kind of knows what this is. You just get to say,
it's a great table. Use
hey
it all
gods,
the time.
Help me. And 4, 5, and 6, they all last for every round from then on, which is crazy. So you very
roll
often
it every turn.
And with Beastmen, both of the melee lords start at weapon skill 6. So if you can just get a 4 on this result early, you can get up to weapon skill 7 and then kind of be at that on par with elves, Bretonnian dukes, stuff like that.
Yeah, most things in the game will cap out at 7, with the exception of if you can keep rolling on the Gaze of the Gods, you can get higher than that. So it's a very, very powerful table, and it's a lot of fun to roll on it. And any proper worshiper of chaos will roll on the Gaze of the Gods table and announce it to their opponent loudly every time they do it, of course.
So almost all of your units have Mark Chaos Undivided, which gives you reroll Fear, Panic, Terror. That's great. Cool. I know a lot of people would love it if we could buy the magic, essentially the marks of different gods. But it's very thematic that Beastmen don't have that necessarily. And rerolling Fear, Panic, and Terror is great. It really helps having small little skirmisher units not panic. They don't tear off the board when they get charged. It's great. Love it. Mm-hmm. Primal Fury, it's almost every unit that's basically a Beastman gets to do this. Although Dragoners don't.
Pretty core to the identity of the army.
Yeah, but Dragoners don't do this. and you notice it. When you play Beastmen, you have a unit that gets to do this, and other units don't. You notice, and you're like, ah,
Mm-hmm.
crap. So
Mm-hmm.
you
It's
get to
one of the
take
best
your
rules the army has. Yeah,
yeah, you get to take your leadership test. If you pass, you get to reroll a hit of 1 in combat. Great.
it's great.
And quickening storm is one of the things I mentioned earlier. You getting to when you hit with Stormcall, you get the +1 initiative and attack on those Dragonors. They also, by the way, Dragonors have a 5-up ward versus magic missiles and vortexes. So people are like sending pillars of fire and stuff at you, and you're just like, I got ward saves.
Not, not
Great.
the best. Yep.
Okay, so we have special spells here, and one of them is one of the best in the game, and the other two,
Easily top 3 in the game.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
the other two are cool. They just don't happen, and that's a bummer
Yeah.
because Vile Tide's too good. So Vile Tide lets you hit a unit with 5d6 strength 1 hits, but they're no armor save, and then this synergizes amazingly with Hagtree Fetish to let you reroll a wound. So as long as somebody
Mm-hmm.
is toughness 6 or lower, you can just wound them on a 6, and then they just lose a wound pretty much. Right?
Yeah. It's 5d6 strength. It's so good that no armor save with those rerolls. Now range 15 is not the best, but
Yeah.
again, this is why you have a very fast army and positioning is king. But it's also only a casting value of 8, so it's pretty easy to get off, which is one of its strengths.
So on average, with Hagtree Fetish, you remove 5 2+ armor save knights from a unit when you cast this on them,
Hmm.
right? When you cast this on a dragon, they get to take their ward and regens, but that means it probably takes off 3 wounds instead of 5. But it can spike to be much higher than that. You can hit a dragon with 27 hits, and it now needs to, and then wound it with 9 wounds, and it now has to take 9 ward and regen saves.
Yeah, and this is one of those few exceptions in the game that's potentially a lot of dice. Potentially 5d6 is quite a lot of dice. And so once you start rolling larger amounts of dice, it's going to start averaging out and become more consistent. That being said, it can spike higher and perform well above average. It can perform lower, but generally speaking, because you're rolling, there's very few things in the game that will roll this many dice when you're doing an action.
Yeah.
So it's going to be more reliable. And then with Hagtree Fetish, it's just such a powerful combo that you can make the whole strategy of your army based around this, getting this off as many times as you can over the course of the game.
And Devolve is basically a vampire count scream, kind of.
Mhm.
Now, you
Kind
don't have
of.
as many ways to lower enemies' leadership, but it's kind of like a vampire count scream. The only problem is that on every single target in the game, Vile Tide tends to do more than Devolve, but it exists. You know.
Yep, except Vampire Scream lets you shoot in the combat, and
Yeah,
this
that's
doesn't.
true.
So,
So,
not as good.
maybe I would love it if this was like an assailment or something, so just do something different, right? That'd be crazy.
Yeah, if it was an assault, because again, you can also Banshee Scream into combat, so or Wailing Dirge into combat too. So,
So,
not as good.
I love doing this for a fun game, especially because Vile Tide can create a lot of feel bad moments in fun games. But Mantle of Gorok, you cast on yourself. The caster gets plus d6 to its strength and attacks, as long as you don't roll a 6. Because if you roll a 6, then you hurt yourself instead. So you can get up to 5 attacks and 5 strength.
Hmm.
So a Beastman, Great Bray Shaman has 2 attacks with his Great Weapon, right? But if you roll a 5 for what this does, you're now at 7 attacks, and your strength is 9 plus your Great Weapon plus 2. So you're strength 10 because it caps out at 10, right? So you can get 7 attacks at strength 10.
I love it. It's exciting, but
So
it's not
funny.
Vile Tide, which is the same problem we always have.
And you have to risk your guy. So on the other hand, though, this is an enchantment, so you can cast this on yourself and only get a 2 plus 2 strength and 2 attacks, and you say, you know what, that's not enough, I'm not going to charge now. You can choose. Or if you get it off and you roll a 5, you're like, oh boy, let's do it.
Yeah, let's go. Go time. All right, did we get to the end?
Yeah, we just got pretty
We
pictures.
did it. Pretty pictures. I love it. We made it. Whoo! All right. So that was a long one, as always, going through the list. Again, the Beastman Army is fantastic. It's definitely competitive. It has loads of interesting builds, tons of utility units, and is definitely one of those armies that, as you become more veteran of a player and really start to understand more the nuances and depth of the game, there's just tons of depth in strategy and combos you can pull off with Beastman, which is why I love the army so much. And it's also loads of fun too. It's a super fun list, great for casual, just super friendly games, but it also has some great themes, right? From
Yeah.
chariots to ambushes to minotaurs. It's so characterful, and it feels so old world appropriate, which is why I love it so much. But if you got this far in the video, hopefully you enjoyed the review. We'll continue to do more of these in the future. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And then, Evan, any closing thoughts for Beastmen?
I feel beastly.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks, everybody. We can't wait to review the Arcane Journal in the near future when it comes. See you next time.